The Power of Habit. This book is all about habits, how are they formed, how they stick in one's brain, and how one can change them whenever necessary. This book contains 9 chapters, all with their own contributions and stories, depicting the different phases of a habit, as well as illustrating how powerful they can be in an individual. That's why the title of this book is The Power of Habit. Your habits have this capacity to rule over you, and it's up to you how you're going to use this power. Looking back at your activities, you'll see that what you do each day is made up of habits. Decision making? No, it's not decision making. They are habits ingrained into you, and they have a huge influence over what you're going to say or do. Each habit may seem minute on its own, but over time, it has its own impact on your productivity, health, financial security, and happiness. This book, The Power of Habits, is divided into 3 parts. The first part of the book discusses how habits emerge in an individual. It considers how habits are formed, how new habits are created, and how old ones are changed. It also discusses how certain products have paved their way into people's homes. Like brushing one's teeth was once an obscure practice but now a national activity. A spray became a $1 million business by becoming a habit. Alcoholics Anonymous interferes with people's habits to stop addiction, and a football coach reversed a team's fortune and made them champions. The second part discusses habits of organizations and companies. It explores how Paul O'Neill, an executive, changed an aluminum manufacturer into a Dow Jones Industrial Average top performer just by emphasizing a keystone habit. With regard to companies, Starbucks' training program has also been discussed in the book, revealing how the habits it instilled in its employees strengthened their willpower. Plus, it also tells a story of how even the most talented surgeons can make major mistakes when the hospital's habits fail to function. The third part discusses society's habits. It includes the success of the civil rights movement by changing Alabama's social habits, and how the right focus led to the creation of a large church in California's Saddleback Valley. It also hovers on certain ethical issues, such as that of a murderer in Britain who could be allowed to go free provided he can prove that his habits made him kill. Every chapter points to a sole idea. You can change your habits as long as you are familiar with how they work. The premise came up about after talking to various executives and scientists and studying research done with different companies. All the studies came up with one definition of a habit. A habit is a choice that you deliberately make at one point and continue to do without having to think about it day by day. Once you make a habit, you stop making a choice and the behavior becomes automatic. Upon understanding how it happens, you gain the power of controlling and changing it. You can find the timestamps in the description box for each chapter, as well as the chapter consolidated summary of each chapter. I have also listed down several thought-provoking questions at the end of the video that will surely help you identify the different habits, the cues, and different elements that will help you change the habits that you want to change. Lastly, in the description box, there is an excellent tool which will help you change a habit and maintain that newly acquired habit over the long period of time. It is one of my most reliable and go-to tools that I have tried in my life to change a habit, and not only change it but keep the good habit. Chapter 1: The Habit Loop. How habits work. According to scientists, habits are formed because one's brain is often searching for ways to perform its required duties with as little effort as possible. As it functions on its own, the brain attempts to make a routine a habit so that it can free up space to accomplish more tasks. Once a habit is formed, the brain will no longer make decisions about it. It won't exert much effort and will divert its attention to other tasks. So, unless you create a new routine, the pattern will always proceed naturally. Think of the human brain as an onion with many layers working together towards various functions. The outer parts of your brain control things like social interactions, creative endeavors, and active learning. The deeper areas of the brain, as well as the areas surrounding the brainstem, are responsible for more primitive structures. They control our automatic behaviors such as breathing, swallowing, or startle response. Towards the center of the skull is the basal ganglia, an often misunderstood and overlooked part of the brain that we are just beginning to truly understand. In the 1990s, scientists discovered that basal ganglia was primarily responsible for the recognition and initiation of patterns. It seemed to store and act on certain habits without the need for activity in other areas of the brain, including those associated with memory. As the brain begins to learn a procedure, it converts sequences of actions into automatic routines. This process is known as chunking and is the root of how habits form. Every day, you unconsciously rely on numerous behavioral chunks. These habits help you to minimize your brain activity and in turn, use your energy much lesser. Likely, you do not have to think about putting toothpaste on your toothbrush. Your body already remembers how to do it. These and many other functions are controlled by your basal ganglia. Your brain is constantly looking for ways to save effort and energy. This is why habits are so crucial to your well-being. Left to its own devices, your brain will try to make nearly anything into a habit. Once the brain detects a cue, the mind proceeds to perform the habit and it will not relax until the habit is completed. The mind will then refresh itself to ensure that it receives its desired result or reward. This is precisely what is called the habit loop. So this shows that there are three components of a habit loop: the cue that serves as the trigger for the habit, the routine or the action you perform to fulfill that habit, the reward or the result you expect after performing the routine. Being aware of these components will help you intervene and change your habit, especially if it leads to undesirable behaviors. I know the concept sounds easy, but it's difficult to implement because the habits you create and develop end up getting so ingrained within you that they already override your common sense. You cannot just change something that you're so used to doing and has become automatic in your system. Habits can be pretty delicate. If the cues change even in the slightest way, the habit can fall apart. If something gets disrupted, the habit will be affected. The brain can perform unconscious choices without having to remember what it has learned. Habits play a huge role in how you behave. You may not recall experiences that contributed to your habit, but once your brain has grasped them, they influence how you act even without you knowing. A cue can be anything. It can be a thought, emotion, person, whatever triggers your habit. A routine can be complex or simple depending on what you've created. And a reward can be tangible or an intangible item such as emotional satisfaction. A habit can be changed by even the smallest shift in the routine due to your inability to recognize habit loops. However, you become unable to control them. So the gist of this chapter is that once you've realized the cues and rewards, you can change the routine and your habit will be changed forever. Chapter 2: The Craving Brain. How to create new habits is what this chapter tells us. You now understand the habit loop, that is the cue, routine, and reward. Anything can act as a cue, whether it's food, emotion, a person, or a thing. Another factor that can play a major role in this is craving. That is why habits are so hard to break. They bring in neurological cravings. These cravings creep into you without you realizing it, and as you feel the benefits, the habits are formed. So, Habits are created by putting together cues to trigger the habit, routine to get one used to it, and a reward to motivate you to do it. A craving will drive the loop and keep it going. An example would be when your phone beeps. Once you hear it, you anticipate the message and you're restless until you read it. If it doesn't make a sound, then you're not bothered. Now, a good question to ask here is, what role do cravings play? Through a good mindset, you can create a good habit. Initially, your drive and energy will be too high. You'll be excited to perform new tasks related to the habit. How will this energy continue? This is where the cravings come in. For example, you wish to begin a habit of working out each morning. You need a cue to remind you that this is what you should be doing once you get out of bed. What you can do is to prepare your gym clothes next to your bed. Once you get up, you'll see them and you'll feel excited to begin your workout sessions. After you're done, the reward you get can be a sense of accomplishment, or it can be a special meal or snack that you get to enjoy without guilt. You will not realize the reward at first, not until you finalize the cue and the routine. After performing the routine for a while, your mind will then crave the reward that the habit provides. Once the craving has kicked in, that's when a new habit is born. It is important to highlight here that you just cannot overcome a habit. You can only change it if you're able to perform a new routine in a cycle with the same cue and reward. Every day, we execute various routines and as a result are exposed to rewards. The more we repeat the habit, the stronger our craving for the reward becomes. This sort of response does not just happen with traditionally addictive actions such as smoking or gambling. Sometimes these cravings can progress to an intensity that makes actions almost automatic. For example, when we reach for the cigarette, turn on the TV, or grab our phone even before we realize what is happening. Really, cravings are the missing piece of all our puzzles. They are what control our habit loops from day to day. But cravings are not given complete authority by our brains. There are certain mechanisms that we can exploit to help us ignore those temptations if we want to. The first step in the process is to recognize which cravings are driving our behavior. For each habit you have developed, you can start by asking yourself why you continue to perform that action after the first time you tried it. Chapter 3: The Golden Rule of Habit Change. The author begins this chapter by explaining why transformation occurs. This chapter teaches readers that a habit can easily be changed as long as the same cues and rewards are in place. The routines can be changed and you will feel that nothing has changed. Why the AA works. It helps alcoholics use the same cues and get the same reward but shifts the associated routines. Alcoholics Anonymous forces members to identify the cues and rewards that encourage their alcoholic habits. Then, it helps them to find new behaviors to replace those routines. Most alcoholics do not drink with the goal of becoming drunk, but rather to escape current struggles within their lives. That is why finding new, healthier means of escape and companionship is such a crucial aspect of the program. People with alcohol addiction often do so impulsively. They pick up a bottle automatically because that is how they deal with anxiety. Thankfully, once they learn alternatives for dealing with stress, they are able to stop drinking, especially when they incorporate these new strategies into their everyday routines. In particular, the act of becoming aware of triggers can be very helpful. Whenever they feel an urge to take up their habit, they should make a mark. This simple action of being aware of the cues can help addicts and habitually impulsive people learn what situations are more likely to trigger the undesirable behavior. In many cases, you can utilize these same strategies at home to help adjust your own habits. However, some habits also require another important strategic element, that is, the belief. Believing in and surrendering to some form of higher power can make the difference in many endeavors. In general, habit replacement works very well, but when the stresses of life begin to overwhelm us, we often regress back to our old ways. But if we can learn to believe in something, believe we can change, believe that someone or something is looking out for us, we are less likely to pick up bad habits when things get tough. This is not just the author's opinion. Numerous scientists have discovered the same thing in their own studies. It is not necessarily a matter of believing in God, but a matter of believing in anything that makes a difference in people's lives. Studies have also shown that people are more inclined to change their habits after dealing with a tragedy. Those who experienced a personal tragedy or even watched a close friend or family member struggling were more likely to radically change their lives. Chapter 4: Keystone Habits. This is a very interesting chapter because when I was reading the book, I was wondering which habits matter the most. And this is probably that chapter which explains that or gives my answer. Changing one keystone habit sets off a chain reaction. This can take place regardless of you being a sole individual or a big organization. But what are keystone habits and which habits matter most? Now, the keystone habits are those habits that help you get ready for major life changes through celebrating small victories and finding ways to develop your other habits. The first principle is that you should celebrate small victories if you really want to change a habit and experience the impact of that change on other areas of your life. As already mentioned, that by establishing a keystone habit, a domino effect is created, which leads to more achievements along the way. For example, you decided to wake up earlier than you're used to, around let's say 6 in the morning. Your main goal is to learn a different language which seems to have no relation with waking up early. However, having that habit will influence other areas of your life that can affect your capacity for learning. When you wake up early, you alter your sleep routine. Because of altering your sleeping routine, you also affect your everyday activities. Perhaps you're able to accomplish more and leave more time for other tasks. All those changes and achievements are counted as small wins, and they all add up to help you achieve your initial goal of learning a new language. The second principle is that structures that help habits have to be established. For example, a group of people who aim to lose weight seem to succeed better by using a food diary as compared to a group who did not. Another example is those people who've made exercising a habit. They also began eating better and became more productive in the office. Smokers began smoking less and showed a more pleasant attitude with family, friends, and colleagues. They don't get stressed as much. Lots of changes were experienced by these people who all believe that exercising is a habit that triggered all these positive habits. Keystone habits can also start at home. There are children of families who eat together that are believed to have better grades, better homework skills, and greater confidence. Those who make their bed every morning are associated with better budget-making skills, productivity, and a sense of well-being. Why should we focus on having a keystone habit? These keystone habits help provide you with a structure that you need to follow that will allow you to change the habit. Chapter 5: Starbucks and the Habit of Success. Charles Duhigg mentions how willpower can become automatic, and I found this idea really intriguing. The author argues that you can manipulate and control the feelings that you do and use them to come up with positive habits leading to a better life. But the question is how willpower affects you. Willpower is not something you have to be born with. It's something that you can learn as time passes. What I found surprising is that the author presents willpower as a muscle of a body. As it works harder, it gets tired. It uses up the energy and doesn't leave much for other tasks. There is also the spillover effect of strengthening willpower. Strengthening willpower in one area spills over to other activities. It affects everything as it gets stronger. You may think willpower is all you have, but it can actually get you places. After all, having self-discipline is more essential to academic performance than intellectual talent. When I read that, I instantly thought that okay, if it's a muscle and if it gets used up, can we get run out? Does willpower run out? If willpower can be learned, then do you have the same amount of it every single day? Why are there days that you're so motivated while on some days you just don't feel like doing anything? But how can you make it a habit of making your willpower stronger? Again, by using the same habit loop, cue, routine, reward. People end up performing better and have stronger willpower if they feel like they understand what they're doing and if it's a personal choice. However, it's really hard to follow orders if you don't understand why are you undertaking them. Now, this is a very important lesson for parents with growing children. If you're setting up rules, you should let your children know why are these rules important. How will these rules help them in the long run? If you're telling them to make a habit of something, let them know why is it important. Because if they will understand what they're doing, it will become a choice and the drive will come from within. Willpower or self-discipline is developed towards one activity. It somehow teaches the brain to implement the willpower habit towards other activities as well. And with this, other areas of your life will also be affected in a positive way. I have experienced this in my personal life. By doing small actions but doing them consistently does not only make you feel more confident, more self-disciplined, but the willpower to do things, to be persistent in other areas also gets strengthened. Willpower can decrease and or fluctuate, but in a professional atmosphere, good treatment will prove to be a big difference. Employees will be motivated to do a better job once they realize they are not just a number in their boss's attendance file, but their contribution matters. Chapter 6: The Power of a Crisis. In this chapter, the author has explained how leaders create habits through accident and by design. He discusses how leaders take advantage of a crisis to push their employees into shaping up and getting better. This chapter basically underlines the idea that a sense of urgency when created by leaders, or maybe slightly exaggerated, can also help create habits. He explains how an organization functions. Large corporations have multiple departments which interact with each other on a daily basis. A harmonious relationship is expected among these departments, yet realistically considering, it doesn't happen all the time. Friction among departments and among employees within the same department is inevitable. You'd think an organization would solve adversities by coming up with rational choices through careful decision making and study of the situation, but that is not the case in reality. These companies are actually influenced by their habits or the patterns that they have used over the years in managing the company and similar situations. These patterns only tend to change through employees who make their own independent decisions. People who have been working also know that companies have their unspoken routines that govern them, because otherwise it would be very hard for them to keep up with all the decisions and rules that they have to deal with on a daily basis. On the surface, it may seem like they're still following the set rules, but underneath, they're really living by the habits they have become accustomed to while working for that organization. I'm sure many of you might contest it, saying that companies really do follow the rules and do not rely on habits. But still, think about it. Whenever there are new employees in a company, the tenured ones tend to not point out to the employee handbook and instead brief him or her using the common laws in the company. This is because organizational habits have already been set to provide balance and peace in the company. Organizations have to create habits that focus on a single priority over anything else, even if it means the balance of power in the company will be temporarily disrupted. They have to realize how powerful habits can be in an organization once established, be very hard to eliminate. But the question is, when is it best to change the habits in a company's culture? The answer is when dealing with a crisis and in situation when everyone feels like there's something that has to be done for the company to survive. In times like these, habits, policies and laws can all be changed. During these moments, everyone can promote a sense of urgency. Chapter 7: How Target knows what you want before you do. In this chapter, the author discusses how companies' method of predicting and influencing shoppers' habits have changed over time And how can they predict or manipulate their habits? A person's buying habits change whenever they deal with major life events. Target and other related companies always aim to know when you've experienced these changes, when you move, you change your job, you get married, give birth, etc., so they can be a part of it. In this chapter, the author has also highlighted a very significant factor that we might not give a thought about how it affects our lives, and that is the familiarity. Stores grab your attention and make you notice new products by placing them in advertisements with those you are already familiar with. Want to introduce new foods into your usual diet? Make them smell, look, and taste like foods you're already eating. Have you realized why the buddy system works in gyms and fitness centers? It's because you'll stay longer in a gym if you're with a friend, or if you'll make new friends there. At the end of the day, it is not about blaming the industry for manipulating your habits, but understanding how you can act upon your own habits by performing a new habit in between two existing routines. Make a new habit sandwich. The power of acquaintance. Throughout history, numerous social movements have changed the way the world works. This is because these kind of habits, regardless of group size, maintain a process of three key elements. Number one, social relationships. When world-changing movements always begin with the social habits of friends, family, and acquaintances, the impact of social relationships can be highly substantiated. From there, they grow on a larger scale and take root within society. Number two, community involvement. The habits begin with close relationships grow throughout communities through the subtle ties that link each member together. Number three, innovative leaders. The leaders of each social movement help new habits endure by expanding upon them with more new habits. These additions create a fresh sense of identity within the group and give members a feeling of ownership. When all three elements of this process bind a social movement, the movement is more likely to endure. These concepts are evident in many of the life-changing movements in history. For example, on the day that Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat for a white man, her actions did not incite change simply because of their nature. In fact, many others had taken similar action by then. Many historians believe that the part of the reason that Parks motivated others to take action was because of her long-standing respect within her community. Sociologists have since attested to the power in that fact. Many of us maintain a majority of our relationships with people who are similar to us in some way, typically through appearance, economic status, or religious or familial backgrounds. In reality, no one has enough friends to spark worldwide change. The situation with Parks maintained another element that to this day stands as an example of how societal transformation can occur. That is, the obligation. As members outside of Parks' social networks saw what was happening, they began to feel a social peer pressure to support the cause, whether because of their race, socioeconomic status, or political affiliation. In the modern age, this influence is known as the power of weak ties, and it is a crucial element to many movements. Since that time, sociologists have examined the various ways that opinion, gossip, and political ideas move through communities. As a result, they have discovered that our weak tie acquaintances are often just as influential, if not more, than our close friends and family. While people who maintain a combination of weak and strong ties within their communities tend to excel, people who lack weak ties tend to find themselves distant from certain parts of the social system and struggle through disadvantages in current trends as well as within their labor market. These people are also more difficult to organize into political movements and are at greater risk for losing their social standing as the time changes around them. Social habits and peer pressure work together to encourage people to conform to group expectations. During this process, dozens of individual habits rather than one consistent pattern manage to combine into a singular motivation, guiding group members in the same direction. In short, peer pressure is the main way that social groups self-organize. The last chapter of the book is the neurology of free will, and it's a very interesting one. In this, the author explains, or rather I'd say answers the question, because it was constantly coming in my mind while reading the book, as to what extent are we responsible for our habits. It actually discusses a moral question. The author explains or answers this question by taking an example of Brian and Angie. They both have their own individual habits that affect their normal lives. Angie lives as a stay-home mom who, to fight boredom, she got dressed up one afternoon and went to the casino. She saw this as a weekly reward for herself. In 2000, Angie's parents got sick and she had to go to Tennessee to visit them. When she got home, she felt that her family didn't need her at all. To alleviate this stress, she again went to the casino. Now, gambling became a habit for Angie. She used to go only to the casino on Fridays, but she changed her routine and gambled on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She had become addicted to gambling, but she didn't realize it was a problem until it affected her life completely. In 2001, Angie had reached $20,000 in debt. She kept this from her husband while trying to straighten things up and clean up her act. She tried to file the compulsion, but she couldn't do it. A few years after, she ended up declaring bankruptcy. She was told that her gambling was done not out of choice, but out of habit. 4 years later, a cognitive neuroscientist named Reza Habib performed a study observing the brain activity of both pathological and social gamblers. The gamblers watched a slot machine and Habib checked their reaction for every result. There were 3 possible results: win, loss, and a near miss. A pathological gambler's reaction to a win is similar to a near miss. Both results trigger the need of the gambler to place another bet. A social gambler's reaction, on the other hand, considers a near miss as a loss, which means he or she may not place another bet. Habib studied 2 parts of the brain where habits reside: the brain stem and the basal ganglia. Another study which illustrates the point is of a man who killed his wife while he was asleep. He experienced what was called sleep terror. He thought he killed an intruder, but in fact he killed his own wife. When put on trial, the jury let him go because they believed he didn't choose to kill and that he wasn't able to prevent the crime from taking place. I believe that we are conscious of most of our activities that we do in our daily life. I'm sure you know how you eat, how you sleep, how you interact with your children, if you have any. You are aware that those habits exist. Now that you realize habits can change, you'll also realize that you have the power to remake them. Believing that change is possible and making that belief a habit will allow the change to become real. That's how powerful a habit can be. In a nutshell, I would say that a habit is created when you do something because of signals and cues, and when you have something to look forward to upon doing that action. There are times when you're not aware that you're doing something out of habit, but once you realized what triggered your habit, that's when you gain the power to change it. Chapter 1: A Study of Habit. The part of your brain responsible for forming habits is called the basal ganglia. This area uses habits to help conserve your mental and physical energy by minimizing the active brain power required to complete certain everyday tasks such as brushing your teeth. Your basal ganglia coordinates with the rest of your brain to initiate habit loops, also known as habitual processes, by monitoring for cues that are the stimuli that prompt your brain to initiate certain habits. Then, when the process is complete, the basal ganglia monitors for any sort of reward or benefit from your actions. This helps it decide if this particular loop is worth using in the future. The more each routine is used, the stronger the habit becomes. In addition, all habits are rarely completely eliminated. Instead, they remain dormant within our brains, just waiting for the right cues. Chapter 2: The Science of Cravings. Each of our habits are fueled by craving. The more we repeat a routine and in turn are exposed to rewards, the stronger our craving for the reward becomes. From small habits to large, and from addictive habits to non-addictive, any routine can be automatic if we perform it often enough. If you wish to counteract a current habit, the first step would be to determine which craving is driving the behavior. Ask yourself, why have you continued to perform that action from day to day? How were you rewarded? If you wish to start a new habit, establish a simple cue that will help you encourage a craving. Then create or determine a simple yet motivating reward that you can initiate after you perform the action. As you continue this pattern, your brain will begin to develop a craving for that reward, especially when exposed to the cue you have established. It may even begin to link other cues to this habit. Chapter 3: Old habits die hard. Before you can change a habit, you must first become aware of your triggers. Whenever you feel an urge to initiate a certain habit, make note of what you were doing at or just before that time. This simple action can help you learn what situations are more likely to trigger the undesirable behavior. Whenever you feel the urge to initiate a certain undesirable habit, you should immediately initiate a competing response, a quick alternative action that offers a similar reward. In this way, new routines are formed around old cues and rewards. When our stress begins to overwhelm us, some form of belief can make the difference between continuing to improve and backsliding into old habits. This belief can be in something as complex as a higher power, or in the simple acknowledgement that you have the power to change your life. This will make you less likely to pick up bad habits when things get tough. Chapter 4: Keystone Habits. Some habits have the power to start a chain reaction of positive change through other routines. These are called keystone habits. Common keystone habits include exercise, making one's bed each morning, or eating dinner as a family. Keystone habits work because they provide steady applications of small advantages, otherwise known as small wins. Once one small win has been accomplished, it sets force in motion towards achieving another small win, another, and so on. Practices of self-awareness are essential to identifying keystone habits. Take note of your regular habits, including seemingly small things. Be especially conscious of the habits you use on days that go particularly well in areas of mood, productivity, or general sense of well-being. Chapter 5: The Starbucks Effect. People who are able to delay their gratification longer are more likely to be successful in other areas of their life, including academics, finances, and social standing. Thankfully, even if you do not naturally have a strong sense of self-control, this is something you can teach yourself to do. Willpower is less like a skill and more like a muscle. The more self-control you exercise, the more exhausted your willpower becomes. And also, like a muscle, willpower has the potential to be strengthened. Developing self-discipline in one area of your life will increase your willpower in other areas as well. The best way to strengthen willpower is to make its development into a habit. Plan your endeavors around inflection points, that is, the areas where you know you are most likely to quit. Establish a strong routine and practice it so that you can habitually continue even when the process is difficult. Chapter 6: The Cycles of Change. Just as encouraging healthy habits can facilitate incredible changes in your life, choosing unhealthy habits can negatively affect other areas of your life. That is why it is so important to change your destructive habits before they become catalysts for disasters. Individual habits of company members are enormously important to company-wide decisions. They act as the base for the routines that companies rely on to operate. When unexpected events happen, the system is able to recover more quickly through these ingrained procedures. In order to maintain peace within a workplace, leaders must cultivate positive, self-perpetuating habits and open communication along with a healthy balance of power. Different branches of the company should stay connected in a healthy way, allowing for a faster response in times of crisis. Chapter 7: Consumer Patterns. For decades, retailers have used their understanding of human behavior to sell their products. These tactics have earned various companies billions of dollars in revenue. Now, retailers use numerous methods to track your shopping habits in order to learn how to convince you to buy their products. Just as behavioral habits prevent us from becoming overwhelmed by decisions, listening habits help us process sound more easily without being distracted. This is why familiar music is often perceived as more enjoyable. The key to helping humans accept the unfamiliar or unwanted is to integrate it as seamlessly as possible. If you dress something new in old habits, it is easier to accept, which is why it is easier to change a routine rather than changing a cue or reward. Chapter 8: The Power of Acquaintance. All enduring, self-propelling social movements, regardless of group, size, etc., maintain a process of three key elements: social relationships, community involvement, and innovative leaders. The power of weak ties is a crucial element to wide range social movements. It is defined as the interconnectivity between minimally acquainted people due to common societal factors such as race, socioeconomic status, or political affiliation. People who maintain weak ties along with their closer relationships are more likely to achieve social, political, and financial success. Individual social habits and peer pressure work together to create a singular motivation within a group. This allows social movements to self organize and synchronize to facilitate more productive action. Chapter 9. Sleep disorders such as sleepwalking and sleep terrors initiate primitive habit loops that occur outside of our normal state of consciousness. With sleepwalking, a person is still able to maintain self preservation and can more easily counteract their subconscious impulses. During night terrors, the sleep cycle deactivates the prefrontal cortex and other high cognition areas, eliminating the possibility of conscious intervention. Other subconscious habit loops are initiated through addictive behavior such as gambling or substance abuse. However, these types of routines, unlike sleep-induced habits, can become consciously modified to improve a person's quality of life. Ultimately, in order for your habits to change, you must maintain the following key factors. You must decide to change your habits. You must identify which habits you want to change. You must identify the cues and rewards for each habit. You must find suitable alternatives for your unhealthy routines. And you must believe that you can change.